Hey everybody, this is Dean and welcome to Photo Blue. Today I thought I'd do a video on how to enhance ICM photographs with Luminar Neo. Now, I've just been experimenting with ICM, or intentional camera movement, and a lot of it has to do with post-processing because you can really enhance some things or even crop the photograph so it's a better photograph. It's best to shoot a bunch of ICM photographs of the same thing particularly as you're learning, so you have a selection to select from and then to edit. But a lot of times when you bring the photograph back after you've messed with it with Luminar, it changes the photograph enough so that you really have to edit some of the photographs to really see what they're going to be like. And so if you don't know what ICM is, if people are interested, perhaps I'll make a separate video on that at some point. But basically, it's using slow shutter speeds and moving your camera in different ways to get different effects. And I've found thus far between about a half a second and 1 second works best for me. But you could actually have longer shutter speeds. But it depends on your motion and how abstract you want the thing and how much blur you want in it and so on. So let's start with this photograph right here, and this is a photograph of the lake. This particular one isn't real abstract. It looks more impressionistic. You can kind of see, or you can actually see, that there's a lake here and there's some clouds and there's a reflection in the lake. Over to the right here, the problem is it's a little bit dark, and sometimes here the highlights are pretty good, but in some of the photographs the highlights are a little light or a little blown out. So one of the first things that you can do, and what I like to do a lot of times, is just adjust the shadows and the highlights of it. And so let's bring the shadows up a little more right here. And we really don't need to mess with, let's see what doesn't do that much to the highlights. You can probably leave the highlights right where they were. And so it's brought out more detail already that we can see. The other thing you can do is once you adjust the highlights and the shadows, you may need to adjust the exposure up and down still to bring them into the ranges that you want. So that's another thing that you can do. So you can start off with this. So if we go back to what the original looked like, you can see it looks much better like that already. Another thing that you can do, and you can actually do this before or after, so you might do it before to see what it looks like and then go back and adjust things, or you can do it in any order really, is the enhance. And so we're going to use AI accent in this case. And you can see it kind of, it really adds to it. Now another thing that I didn't really mention up here, we go back to, let's go back to an enhance. Let's reset that. So we're going to take that back out. So if we go back to tools here and we go back up to develop, we can get a similar effect. With smart contrast, but it's not brightening it as much there. So you can mess with the contrast as well if you want. So we can add a little contrast to it. Go back to enhance, and let's go ahead and put the accent in. And it does change the contrast. It brightens it up, brightens the greens a little bit. We also have sky enhanced that we could use on this. I'm not going to use it in this case, but you can use it on photographs. But with ICM is a little more abstract. It might not recognize that it's a sky, and so it might not do anything. So sometimes the sky enhancer will do nothing in photographs. Obviously, if there's no sky, it won't do anything. And if it doesn't know it's a sky, if it's that abstract, it might not do anything to it. On the other hand, I found this landscape down here. The foliage enhancer on it is really good. So if we take this foliage enhancer We can really exaggerate things. We probably don't want to exaggerate it as much in this case because this particular photograph, we can tell what things are and we don't want it to look too over the top. But as it gets more abstract, you can use this as long as there's pretty much if it's green, it will kind of boost it up. Also, golden hour is another thing you might want to try. Let's exaggerate it a little bit and then back down. Sometimes just adding a bit of that, and you can mess with the haze as well. So any of these tools on here are things that you can mess with, and you can mess with another good one to mess with, and we'll go into this with a more abstract one. We can do toning because we can do shadows and highlights. We can do a matte look, mystical glow. We can do those all as well. Those are really nice to mess with more abstract photos than this particular one. And I'll show you another example a little later. Now, let's look what the difference is. This is the original photo, and this is the one that we've messed with. And you can exaggerate, of course, all these things more or less. I tend to exaggerate sometimes a little bit more when I'm doing editing, as do most people who do videos on editing, just so that you can see what's going on. So you can make this more subtle, or you can make it more exaggerated if you want, in many aspects. But you can see, if we go back to the original, that photograph doesn't have that much interest in it. There's no detail to the right. A lot of the detail is gone. This one, it adds to it, and it looks almost like these are brush strokes in the photograph. So that's something to keep in mind. Now let's go back and let's revert this particular photo, because I'm going to show you another trick here. So this is back to normal now, or back to the original. We're going to go to presets. Now, I'm not much for presets, although there are a lot of presets in various editors, including Neo, that are nice presets. But usually I feel I don't really want to go with a preset. Everybody's got that preset. Let me just do it manually. So a lot of people don't like to use presets, or if they do use presets, it's a preset they develop themselves. Like, for instance, if you do your own if you do a lot of landscape, you might want to create your own preset because you might be doing the same thing over and over again. For example, people that do infrared photography sometimes have a few different presets that they create because they're going to go through the same process over and over again with most of the photographs and then fine-tune them. And so if you have a preset, you have a place to start with. So one interesting thing here that I found is under, these are Easy Landscape collections. So there's these different collections that we can go through here. And you can use any of these collections and try them out, even if they're not, this is Waterscapes, for example. We could use that regardless if there's water in the photograph, just to see what it looks like, particularly with more abstract things. But one interesting thing here under Easy Landscapes, they have a long exposure one, which this is actually a long exposure. And so we pop that in, you can see it's added some detail in there. And if we go down to here, it's changed it quite a bit. Now, once we have that set, we can go back in and we can go here to edit. And we can go to the edits and see what it changed. These are all the edits from the preset. And we can go in and adjust any one of these from the edits, or we can just layer on top of it and add another set of changes that we want to do in here. For example, we could go to develop, and we might pop up the shadows some. So we can use a preset and start from the preset and then add to that, which is a pretty good strategy to use, and it can kind of help you. So let's, once again, I'm going to revert to the original real quick. I'm going to go back to presets. So the nice thing about presets is, and one thing you need to be careful of, is when you do a preset, it's going to set everything to that preset. So you can try different presets and you don't have to reset everything. It's going to just set it to the last preset that you did. So you want to start with the preset first if you're going to use it, because if you do changes and then put the preset in, it will delete delete your changes. And so you can see we've got all this. We can even do a black and white version. And so we can try these different things. It takes a minute for it to apply the presets. We go back up here. Let's go to Waterscapes real quick. So I'm going to go back to the original photograph here without any settings on it. And I'm going to try some of these here with the Waterscapes collection. So you can just go through these and see what you like. There's another black and white one. And then once again, look at this as a starting point. Look at this preset as a starting point, and then kind of fine tune it into what you want. That's the best way to use a preset. You don't want every photograph to have the exact same thing applied to it. Optimally, every photograph would have its own kind of manual settings or whatever, but there's nothing wrong with starting with a preset. All right, so let's look at another photograph here. This one is a little bit more abstract. It is a flower right here, and some ICMs get even more abstract than this. But there's no sky in here or anything, but let's just go real quick to the edit menu, and let's take a look at some of the things that we can do to really change this kind of dramatically using some of these presets. So once again, I'm going to go to Enhance, and I'm going to accent it, and brightens it a little bit, makes it a little looks a little better there. And we're going to go down to landscape again, and we're going to just put a little bit. You don't want it too much, but you can see if we go back to the original, it's brightened it up, it's added a bunch to it, it's added a little more interest, a little more texture, or it's brought out the texture. It also messes with the golden hour a little bit. I'm going to take that off. Then we can mess with a lot of these features, like there's matte. I don't think that works well with this one particularly. There's mystical. I actually like a little bit of that in there. And you can mess with the settings of all of these as well. There's also, let's take a look at glow real quick. I don't think we'll use that in this one, but that's another thing that you can soften. You can adjust the focus even more. You can mess with the focus even more if you want to, and soften it and do things with the glow as well. You can even add film grain in if you wanted to. But one that I'm particularly interested in showing you right here is toning, because particularly with abstract ones, or anyone really, but particularly with abstracts, you can add some interest using toning, because you can tone the shadows and highlights differently. So let's take a look at toning right here. We can adjust the shadows and the highlights in this. This is really good for more abstract ones, or anyone really, because you can adjust the shadows and the highlights separately. So let's pop up the saturation here and the shadows, and let's make the shadows, let's just take a look at different ways it goes, but let's make the shadows kind of more of a blue color, and go to highlights, and let's make the saturation, bring up the saturation here, and then we're going to let's make it warmer. We can also drag up the amount on that somewhat. All right, so we've made this a vastly different and more interesting photograph now, because if we look back what it looked like, that's kind of dull and uninteresting, a very flat photograph. But now we've made something that has more interest to it. It looks very much like an abstract or impressionist painting, and so it's really quite a bit different just by using Luminar Neo on the photograph. So those are some ways that you can use Luminar Neo with ICM. It's pretty exciting what it can do with it and how easily it can do. You can also, of course, do a lot of these enhancements using other editors if that's what you prefer. I'm Dean, and this has been Photo Blue, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like.